Hello all, I hope you're doing well today. A key theme on this channel is that of masculine initiation, especially masculine spiritual initiation. And really that journey is three journeys in one. It's the journey from boy to man, the classic initiatory journey. It's also the journey from the feminine world to the masculine world and the psychological journey that implies. But finally, and most fantastically, it's the journey from Mother Nature to Father Spirit, or away from the material into what you truly are, who you really are. And I want to drill down a little bit in this video about that reconnection with the earthly father, which is extremely powerful, extremely important. Now, don't worry if you have issues with your earthly father. Some men tragically have lost their father. Other men, their father was never really there, or he's been a bad guy, or you can't connect with him for whatever reason. There are still things you can do to embark on this journey, which I'll get to. But I want to start with the immediacy of the relationship with the earthly father and how it's so imperative we reconnect with our father's soul. Now, again, if you don't have a present father or whatever else has gone on, just think about this video through the frame of the other side, what your future son might need, what your son now might need, or even what other youngsters that you come across may well need in your community as an elder. So first of all, men don't really need big conversations. As I say, it's the connection with the soul that matters. Seeing his soul is the key thing here, and seeing the world as he does is the key thing here. We're not really looking for that, I love you, son, I love you, dad, we see in American movies. That happens about 1% of the time. And in many ways, that's an emotional, almost feminized version of the reconnection between the son and the father. So don't get lost in that stuff. That's not really how it works. Most importantly, to begin this journey back to seeing the soul of your father, you actually have to move away from your father. This is very classic in spiritual journeys. We see it with the prodigal son, most famously in the Bible. He has to go away and almost become a bit of a mess, chase the temptations of the world in order to reveal his love for his father. And we see this replicated in all manner of ways in our arts and so on. Luke Skywalker famously has to reconnect with the soul of his father, even though it's totally embroiled in darkness. Another one that's oddly moving is Michael Corleone in The Godfather. He doesn't want anything to do with his father's ways because his father is a gangster. But in the end, he saves his father. Now, that's almost a tragic reworking of the Return of the Son because his love for his father actually drags him into that world and he ends up destroying the family down the line. It's a Shakespearean tale, that one. I'm getting a little off topic there. But the point is, the journey to the soul of the father is extremely powerful for men, and we do repeat that story again and again in our great stories in our culture, or cultures I should say, because it's not just Western culture you'll find this. But the point is, in your life, you almost have to rebel against your father to an extent. Now, when I say rebel, I don't necessarily mean, yelling F you and whatever else to upset him. I just mean you have to become your own person. You have to move away from what he is and go and face your own challenges in life. And very often that means, pursuing your own avenues in work, learning about the world of women, all these sorts of things, joining your own sports teams, engaging with the world of younger men, joining a rugby team, a football team, whatever it is, an MMA gym. And the idea here is you're building the independent self and you're almost turning into the best man you can be without the guidance of an elder. And naturally, this will take you to a place where you start to experience the challenges that all men have been through. And this is normally especially true with the challenges of the world because you'll face other men there. And as I'm sure you already know, many men you'll meet out there are great, awesome people. Some aren't. Some are going to be cruel. They're going to be twisted. Some are going to be manipulative. Some are going to be overly emotional and weak. And you're going to see all sorts of difficult things, challenging things, horrible things. And it's going to confront you. And sometimes you're going to be left in really difficult situations where you don't know what the right decision is. Sometimes there isn't a right decision. And it's at this time we have to start looking for the elder. That person who can guide us, not so much with the right answer, but the right emotional energy. Now, this I think really kicks in when we have issues with women as men, or at least it did with me and many of the men I've done this work with in the past. And when we see the challenges of women that they provide, it can be really hard because, especially in liberal modernity, we're told that women are just like men, and then you get in an interpersonal relationship with one and you think, no, they're not. They're really not. They're more poetic than men, they're more emotional than men, they're hard to read, they're not logical. And sometimes, most of us, I think it's part of our masculine journey of growth, we might fall in love with a woman, maybe even the wrong woman, and get really wounded by that. And often we don't know how to deal with the intense intoxication, of falling for the wrong woman. We think we're falling in love, we're actually falling into hell. Look at how it ends, look at the state you're in. It's a sign you weren't really in love. If you're in love, you can let go easily and move on. Anyway, the point I'm making here is we start to come full circle, and this offers us an opportunity to start to understand the world that our Father has lived through, the world that he's seen. And again, it's a bit like I speak about with the relationship with God the Father. It's best expressed in a voiceless way. Women often want men to talk more. You hear this a lot, men need to share their feelings. Well, not necessarily. That might just do them more damage and they might end up like women. And you get a lot of men these days, very often they've been through a rough time, brutal experience, and then they think, oh, because talking made me better, that's all men need to do. No, that's just going to make us women. There's a space for talking, there's a space for empathy, there's a space for sharing, but men need action, they need initiation, they need growth. That's what helps them really move forward. And I think a good way, historically, that this has happened is in male spaces for fathers and sons. I used to work with a guy, I used to do a bit of this work with men in a coaching capacity, and he said to me, look, all I have though is football with my father. He can't communicate. But I said, look, football's great. Football's an awesome arena that you can enter. Why? Because you think about what football is when you go. Well, a lot of the connection, the communication is voiceless again. You might cheer, you might cry if you get relegated or win the cup or whatever. You're part of a tribe, a community. There's a narrative, a cultural narrative to whatever that club means. Lots of clubs have that in this day and age, and historically that's why English football, Scottish football are very popular. Celtic and Rangers, Liverpool, Chelsea, there's strong identities to these clubs that people become part of. And I have made content on the channel saying that's been corrupted, and I think it has. But it's not because of the roots of these things are bad. They were actually quite good. Part of a place for men to really connect. As a side note, it's a real tragedy that the powers that be, the evil forces, have got their hands into football because, they're trying to push this whole LGBTQ ideology, bring women into the game. It's a real tragedy because it's detracting from what it fundamentally is, which is a male space, especially for father and son to bond and learn about the world. It's sort of a pseudo-initiation in many ways for football clubs for people. And if these spaces were allowed for men in football and otherwise, you'd see the Andrew Tates of the world disappear in a matter of weeks because men wouldn't be yearning for that masculine energy and finding it in excessive places anymore. But, you can still move beneath those dark forces of the world and connect with your father if that's all you have. Of course, there are other options here, rugby clubs, cricket clubs, whatever it is you do, boxing match. That place where you can connect and share the experience and see through the same eyes are extremely important. And again, especially as you age and you experience the hardships of life and what it demands. Now, I started to see this in my own life with my own father as I grew, and I had a real toxic relationship with a woman I was really lost in. It was the first time I realised my father was giving me really good advice. Just turn your phone off, don't talk to her, don't be too needy, don't be too available. Consider if this is what you really want. Now, I was really lost in that woman. My soul was trapped in her. I'd made her my God, essentially, and boy, did I pay for it. But I'm glad I did, because it showed me women are not your God, and if you think they are, you'll go to hell. But anyway, it allowed me to understand my father, which in turn allowed me to understand some of his relationship with my mother. They divorced. Again, in the culture I grew up in, raised by my mother. I love both my parents, so no hate to either of them, but I did take my mother's side, because I lived with her, Again, the culture would tell you men are bad. As a young kid, you don't know anything else. There are no men around me, no church. Football club was probably the only thing I had, but that was getting feminized. Education was very feminized. But it allowed me to see the world through my father's eyes and how difficult women can be and how complicated they can be. What I mean is I started to connect with his soul and see how tragically our family had lost that role of the father. And as I've said before in videos, the father doesn't need to be this, wise, all-knowing figure. Sometimes just his presence is enough. Sometimes the presence of the father is enough for boys to behave. And I've said before about the story of the elephants in Thailand, how these young elephants were just knocking over cars and attacking the park rangers, and the female elephants couldn't do anything. And they just didn't know what to do because these elephants were out of control. They thought they might have to put them down. Well, in the end, what happened was they had to take in more elephants to this sanctuary, but they were older male elephants, big, strong male elephants. And immediately the younger teenage elephants just went right into line, because they realized, look, these are male elders. We better do what they say, And I realized that I started to think, okay, I always conceptualized the father energy as tyrannical, but it's actually not. Yeah, it has a tyrannical side, don't get me wrong, if a father's being cruel. And I'm sure if we're really honest as men, sometimes we gravitate into that. That's why we need consciousness and a path of redemption and openness with each other as brothers to learn when we do. But the real father, the real wise king, is the loving boundary, the discipline, the structure, the order. And of course I started to see this as I reconnected with the soul of my father. And yeah, of course it meant that we started to get on a lot better. But don't get me wrong, if he's still yabbering on about, I don't know, whatever he saw at the post office, I can still be like, yeah, all right, Dad. I've been going on about it for 15 minutes now. I'm not saying you have to be like, everything's perfect. There are still going to be disagreements and all that. The point is that I was capable of reconnecting with his soul, and that was ginormously healing for me, as it is for men when they can reconnect with the father. Now, as I said, I don't want to leave those folks out whose father may have disappeared for whatever reason, or let's just be honest, hasn't been a great man, or maybe you don't even want to reconnect with your father, or maybe you're not even ready at this point. Well, there are many different things you can do. The first thing is just to come to peace with whatever actions your father took that weren't ideal. You have to let that poison out because it's going to completely destroy how you think about yourself as a man. You'll probably replicate those behaviors down the line. But also, it's just going to poison how you think about life in general. You'll be a victim to all sorts of ideologies that are going to come your way, especially the toxic masculinity thing. It's where you often get guys in gangs who start talking about this feminist lingo. It's because they've gone to the extreme and they think that's what masculinity is. But of course, it was always poisoned from the beginning. Again, other options here, are reconnecting with a surrogate type father, a stepfather or another father figure, an elder, a mentor, a priest is a good one as well. And this leads me to the next step. This isn't really about this. I should do an independent video on it. But connecting with your tradition, your culture, that can be another way of healing as well. Coming to terms with what that is. Again, very often the West isn't trendy in this day and age. If people are exploring things spiritually, they'll go to the East. If they want the structure of tradition, they might start exploring things more online, like Jocko Willink or Goggins or Joe Rogan, or is it Chris Williamson, his name? These online, sort of new age men, teacher types. And I'm not saying they're not good, but to be honest, you don't really want something that's online. Ideally, you'll have a tradition that you can really dive into that's very deep and historic. It's a good start, don't get me wrong, but you're going to need a bit more than that in the long run. And of course, making peace with God the Father. Now that comes in two ways. Number one, make peace with all the ideas. I'd let go of all the new atheism. I'd let go of all the ideas of religion you have, as hard as that may well be, and just experience it for what it is. And if for a time, just don't listen to anybody. Just whatever you're interested in, whether it's Buddhism, read the Upanishads. Sorry, I think it's Hinduism, isn't it? Or maybe you could, read the Gospels or whatever it is in the Bible, and read it for yourself. Like, don't listen to anyone else. Again, it's almost that thing again of going away and becoming your own person. Then when you're ready, you'll come back. When you're ready to go into that next stage of maturation. So go away into, your own understanding of these things. Let go of all the ideas. Come to peace with them. Don't listen to what anybody says. Learn a bit yourself, and then you'll be ready for the teacher. And more importantly, of course, it's the mystic journey, and that also involves completely letting go. But you don't need much for that. If you can just sit still and just be with what you are, maybe your head's telling you you're stupid and what the hell are you doing this for, and what is the point in closing your eyes, and who's this idiot Richard who told you to do this? Like, let it talk. Just leave it. Just observe it, And eventually it will run out of steam, and then you might just get a bit of time where you're nice and still and steady. You know what? This is cool. It's just like sort of floating on still waters in the sea. Relaxing. It's lovely. I'm at peace. And then you slowly, you'll find that as you come out of that, you'll carry that energy into your life. And sometimes, as many people find, you get the opposite because you've been very still inside. You'll go out to the world and it'll be noisy. And you're like, oh, God, all this shouting. That's one thing that I always find. I wish everyone would stop shouting in this day and age. If you meditate a lot, you really recognize it. You go online, yell, all this emotive stuff, all this emotive media designed to draw you in. You become increasingly averse to it. You're like, ooh, that's a bit much. Because you want the stillness of the father, not the emotionality of the female world, And again, I don't want to sort of pathologize the female world. That also has a light side to it, the loving mother, the poetic exploration of the emotions, the arts, these sorts of things. And of course, men can embrace that too. However, for me, the ground of all being is God the Father. That's sort of Christian understanding, and we have to sink into his love. So anyway, hopefully this video made sense for some of you out there and it was useful. It really is a powerful journey. This stuff doesn't happen overnight. It might take you a year, might take you 10 years, might take you a lifetime, but it's all good, friends. Once we let go to what is, time doesn't matter. It's all just about the unfolding of your soul. And just as a final note, if you do enjoy these videos, please do join the Substack. I'm building a community of men there, going on initiatory journeys, connecting, finding out who they truly are, and moving away from the corrosion of modernity. Other than that, do subscribe to this channel if you're new. God bless you, brothers.